So I feel like I need to just address the elephant in the room. If you hear a ticking noise, that's actually my heart. I have a mechanical valve. I'll let you hear it. That's not a sound effect added on. That's literally my heart. And today I'm going to tell you about how and why my heart ticks like that. Spoiler alert, it's because I died 3 times. So before we get started, I want to address the fact that I'm probably going to use some terminology wrong. I'm not in the medical field. There's very little I know besides what they did to me. And I'm probably going to use the wrong terminology or medical lingo. That's not the purpose of this video. Mainly what I want to share with you is exactly what happened to me and kind of share my experience of everything that went down. So what happened? I had what was called an aortic aneurysm. My first signs of symptoms, or should have been red flags that I didn't notice, was around the end of the year of 2020, I really started feeling really run down. Like I was just tired all the time. I could get 10, 11 hours of sleep, like knock myself out and then wake up. And the next day I still just felt incredibly tired. If I would go work out or whatever I did, I constantly would be out of breath, and it's like my chest was beating so hard. I was like, man, I just thought I was killing it in the gym, honestly, because, I was like, I'm doing good. Look at me go. But I had that going on, and then around October, early November, I started having this issue with every time I'd go to bed, I'd lay down, and if I'd laid on my left side or my right side, technically if I'd laid on my side, it just felt like I could not catch my breath. It felt like someone was smothering me. I would try to take a deep breath in, and no matter what I would do, I could not catch my breath. It literally felt like someone was pushing on my chest, and I was like, ooh, that does not feel good. But I just would readjust myself and try to get through it, which, again, probably shouldn't have ignored that. But other than that, I felt fine, and I'd gotten so used to constantly feeling run down that it wasn't something that I noticed as much, because I'm like, well, I'm always tired. And I just thought I'm working a lot, and, I was working out a lot, trying to get in better shape, and I just thought, well, I'm just tired. That's all there is to it. All while this was happening, I was seeing my primary care physician, and she kept increasing me on blood pressure medicine because my blood pressure going through the roof. And she, near the end of it, was saying that, well, you're not taking your blood pressure medicine. And I was like, I assure you that I am. But she said, there's no way your blood pressure could be technically going up higher if you're taking it. And I was like, well, I don't know. So eventually, she just said, well, do you want to do an echo? And I was like, what's an echo? And she's like, they'll look at inside you. We'll just play it for safety and see what's going on in there. If there's anything, like maybe you might have a clogged artery or something. And I came this close to canceling the appointment because I was like, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just tired. And I was like, I don't want to do this echo. And thank God that I did, because it's been told to me several times that if I hadn't done that, they would have just found me dead in my house, either at sleep or who knows when. So I'm very grateful that I did go to that. And when I did go to get it done, it was the weirdest. It was weird. And when I did go get it done, it was probably the first time in my life I've ever felt scared for my life. Like, to the point where I didn't think I was going to make it. Because the lady was super nice. Super duper nice. And when I went in there, I took off my shirt and she laid me down, explained to me what she was going to do, because I was like, I've never had this done before. And she's like, don't worry. A lot of people come in and get it done just to double check things. She's like, there's probably nothing wrong. We're just going to rule out some stuff. And I said, okay, cool. And I'll never forget, I'm lying there on my side, And I'm actually having trouble breathing because it's the side that, as I mentioned earlier, that I had trouble breathing. And she was saying, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she puts it on me. She's going up and down with this machine. And she has the audio on it, I guess. And I hear it's going, whoa, 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 whoa. Like it's this noise. And I can hear my own heart. And it's going, boop, 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 boop. Like it's not, even to me, I'm like, that doesn't sound very good. Like it just didn't, you see in movies and stuff, people's heartbeats and stuff like that. And I was like, well, mine doesn't sound like that. And she does a lot and goes over me several times. And she just kind of got quiet, and I was just still trying to joke around and stuff. And she said, "Uh-oh," like under her breath. And I was like, "Uh-oh? Who says uh-oh?" And I know she wasn't trying to let me hear it, because it was like she did that, and she immediately got up, and she said, "I don't want you to panic." Which, if you tell someone not to panic, what's your first response? Panic. Because that's what I did. I was like, what? And she goes, "Just stay here. I'm going to go grab a doctor real quick." And I'm like, okay. And I was like, oh, that's weird. So I'm not fully in full panic mode yet, but I'm like a little nervous, thinking like, what's going on here? Is my heart, just skip? Like the wildest dreams, I was thinking like something stupid, like it's just beating weird and they'll have to put me on medication or something. The doctor, the cardiologist they have there, comes in and he proceeds to explain to me that my upper aorta above my heart is swollen, and says that it's 6 times larger than what it should be. And I was like, is that bad? And they said, yes, it's very bad. And then they proceeded to tell me if I didn't have surgery within the next 48 hours that I was going to die. And I said, oh, that's not good. And so I called my mom, who my mom and dad, ironically, were on their way to Tunica to go gamble because, it was their anniversary. And so I tell them I'm at the doctor's, and they just told me I'm going to die. And mom, thinking I'm joking, is like, "Don't play." And then I just start crying. And I just said, they're telling me all this stuff is wrong with my heart or above my heart. I don't quite understand. And they take me over and they do a CT of my chest. And then I'm in like this little, it's like my own ER waiting room. They prick me, I got the IV in me and everything. And, I'm freaking out. And then mom and dad turn around. They're on their way to the hospital. And my mom gets there. And they take her into the room away from me because they don't want me hearing this. And I see my mom's face look at me. And I'll never forget it. She just starts crying. And I'm already pretty upset. And she comes in and says, "They're going to fly you to Memphis." And I said, "Oh, I don't want to fly to Memphis." And they go, "They already got a helicopter on its way." And I said, "Is it that bad?" And she looked at me and said, "Yes, it's very bad." They said, "We're going to fly you to Memphis." And that was the plan. And they can do surgery on you tomorrow. And I was like, tomorrow? Like no game plan? I was like, and then I just started begging them, just let me go home. Just let me go home. Because if you know me, you know that I am a huge animal lover. I have 2 dogs. Like, they are my world. They mean the world to me. And I was begging them to let me come home because I really wanted to tell my dogs bye. Because that morning when I left, I don't know if you do this, if whenever you leave your house, I always tell my dogs a time. I was like, I'll be back at 4. And like, they're not going to know the time, but I always say, I'll either be back before dark or, I like to leave lights on in the house when I'm not home for them. But if I'm coming home before it's going to be dark, I don't leave a light on. So I was begging them to please let me come home so I could tell my dogs what was going on and leave a light on, get food for them and stuff like that. And the doctor looked me straight in the face and said, son, if you don't have a surgery and we don't get you somewhere who can operate on you, you'll never be able to talk to your dogs again. And I was just, oh my gosh, like that sucked. That really sucked. So they fly me to Memphis. But once I arrived in Memphis, all that changed. So they started doing tests on me in Memphis, the same tests they were doing here, but they were doing more extended tests. If you're a medical person, you probably know what this is called, but I can't recall what it is. But they were putting dye inside me, and they put me in the CT machine so they could check like my arteries to see what was going on and things like that, and then x-rays and just a butt ton of tests. The doctor there comes in and starts talking to me and said, there's more wrong with you than what they thought. And at that point, I'm like, what else could be technically wrong if already I've been told, I got like 48 hours. And he says to me, he goes, there's a valve that opens and closes. And it is completely blown off. And I was like, what does that mean? And he's like, it's hanging on by a thread. And he said, quite honestly, it's a miracle you're alive right now. And I was like, oh, cool, And they also diagnosed me with Marfan syndrome. Now, a little fun fact about Marfan syndrome. Most people with Marfan syndrome are like 6-7 foot tall, very long and lanky. And if you know me, I am not 6 foot tall. I'm not long and lanky. I'm like part of the 3% of people who has Marfan syndrome who isn't a giant. And quite frankly, that pisses me off because if I'm going to have this thing, I'd love to be super tall. At least that would be a benefit of it. But so not only did they diagnose me with Marfan syndrome, they did see where my upper aorta was about to have an aneurysm. But they noticed apparently below my heart, again, I don't know a lot of medical terms, but below my heart was I'm just going to be stupid with it, but like the tube coming out of my heart wasn't even fully connected. The way they explained it was like, here's the tube and here's this, and they weren't connecting. Like, blood was just squirting out in my body, and just enough was getting through to keep me alive. And to hear that, it's like, sweet, I guess. And then the top part, the actual valve on my heart that opens and closes, was, the way they explained it to me, was almost blown off. Like, there's barely a flap on there. And again, that's like oh, okay. And I'm like, this is piling up pretty big. After they reviewed everything that was wrong with me, they realized it was more complicated than what it first appeared. And there was several things that, due to like a birth defect, that wasn't even connected correctly. And literally, I had blood at the bottom of my aorta coming out of my heart. It was just squirting out blood, and it was not good, of course, because why would it be? Now, to give you a time reference, this was when the big ice storm came through, if you remember, in February. And this was 2 days before it happened. And so that doctor in Memphis was calling around other hospitals that were known to do this surgery. There's one in Houston, Texas. There's one in Connecticut. And I think there was one in like Arizona. I'm not sure. But we chose the Houston one because they said it was the world's leading surgeon who could do this. And they actually had an opening. And I'll try not to get too religious with this, but I truly believe that it was an act of God, because there's no way I should have been able to get in. But they had an opening. And the only reason they had an opening to do this surgery the day that I was going to have it done is because of the ice storm coming. They had a whole team put together to do this surgery on a prince from Saudi Arabia was coming in. Like, they'd already had a plan. He wasn't going to have this exact surgery, but he was going to have a heart surgery done. And they'd canceled because they said, hey, we see the weather that's coming early this week, we're going to wait till it's done. So they had the whole team already put together in Houston. And they said, if he can be here tomorrow, we'll do the surgery tomorrow. And within like an hour, they had me on a plane from Memphis, a little, one of those planes again. Here I am strapped to the thing again. And they fly me to Houston, Texas. And I get there. My mom, actually, they let her ride in the plane with me. And I won't get too far into it because that's her story. But once we got there, I gave her my phone on the Gertie as they're wheeling me in because they're going to take me in there. And because I had my insurance card and all that jazz. So I gave her all my wallet and my cell phone so they could get me like put in the system or whatever. And they carry me to my room. So I don't have my phone. I don't have anything. And they get me to my room. And according to her, she cried, begged, pleaded, but they would not let her in that hospital. And the reason was due to their protocols. Instead of like in Memphis, where you could have one person in the room at a time, they said no visitors, no exceptions. And you got to remember that the time frame, this is when, everything was going, the bug. I'm trying to avoid saying it so I don't get, my video doesn't get flagged because it's not a conspiracy video on that or anything. But because of the bug going around, they would not let her in the building. She, God bless her, she begged, pleaded, fought, said, I don't want my son, because, to my knowledge, she says, I'll see you in a minute. And they take me to my room. And I get to my room, and a doctor comes and starts talking to me and drawing on the board, explaining to me what's happening and why they're trying to operate on me so fast. Is they're saying that I'm about to have an aortic aneurysm. And if I have that, I'm dead. And I was like, oh, okay, that's not good. And the whole time I'm like, is my mom going to come up here or what? And eventually, it was about 3 hours later, the phone rings in my room. And I'm like, why is my room ringing? I answer it, and it's my mom crying. And she's telling me that they won't let her in. That, the hospital has strict policy and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh my God. And I'm sitting there thinking, am I ever going to see my parents again? Am I going to see anybody again? Because that next morning I'm going in. I'm going, I got to go have this surgery. So I go to bed that night in that room thinking, well, when I wake up in the morning, they're going to operate on me. And I didn't get to tell anyone bye. I didn't get to see my dogs. I didn't get to see my parents. I didn't get to say bye to my friends. So a lot was going on, and I was just praying all that night, just please let me live. Don't let me die. And however my mom did it, the hospital had rules, policies, but they said if she could prove that she had a negative test, I said the word, I'm going to bleep it. But if she could prove she had a negative test, that she could come say bye to me before they take me into surgery. So she went by herself in Houston. My dad and my sister and my brother-in-law are traveling to Texas now. They're driving there. They're not going to be there by the time I'm having the surgery because of, how long it takes to get there. And my mom by herself is trying to find a way around Houston, Texas, no vehicle. She has my phone and no money besides what was in my wallet. And so it's like, it's a mess, but she did it. She found a place that would give you one of the instant tests. And luckily she came, like I was in the room. They made me shave and all this stuff before they shaved my whole body. Side note, I'll get a little funny with it because of all the gloom and doom that's happening. One experience I'll never forget is I had to get completely naked, of course. And not just with a gown. I didn't have a gown on. I was butt-ass nude, laying on this bed. And this big black man comes in. He looked like Shaq. Like, he was the nicest guy. And he was so cool to me. And he goes, hey, man, I'm here to shave you. And, you just think about your life and go, things I never thought that would happen in my life is being butt-ass nude, laying on a bed, being shaved by a big black man. And that happened. But he literally shaved my entire body from pretty much from the head to my knees, completely shaven. And no, that's not why I'm bald. Fun fact, I was bald long before this happened. Groin, all that jazz. You know, you get what I'm saying. Literally from kneecaps up, I'm completely bald. And that sucked, because that was just a weird experience, because I'm just like, oh Lord, I never thought this would happen. So after that, my mom shows up, she has my phone, and I actually was able to, I wrote a note. It was like a goodbye note that I saved in my phone. And just in case, like when I stress, I thought I was going to die. I 100% thought I'm not coming out of this surgery. Like, I really thought that was it. And so I was able to write a quick note. And my mom's crying with me, where she's hugging me. She's saying all these things, you know, you're going to be okay. And they keep coming to the door, and they're knocking on the door. It's like, hey, we need him down in prepping. We gotta take him. We gotta take him. And my mom's holding on to me, crying, and just telling me how much she loved me. And that Dad, but she was like, by the time you wake up, Dad and your sister will be here, and everything's going to be okay. And I remember looking at my mom, and all I said was goodbye. I didn't know what else to say. And I just said goodbye, because I thought this was goodbye. I thought, I'm not coming back. All I remember after that is I'm crying, you know, I'm laying there. The anesthesiologist comes up to me, and they get, you know, they talk to me a little bit, you know, or trying to ask me questions to calm me down. And it actually does the opposite. Because he's like, you have any pets? And when he said that, all I kept thinking about was, I'm not going to see my dogs. And I just start, you know, just bawling. And he's like, just count backwards. And, you know, he's trying to just calm me down. And I'm breathing, like I'm almost hyperventilating at this point. But they got the mask on me, put me to sleep. And it was at that point, everything went black. I remember hearing things, but not being able to see. It was like utter darkness, but I could still hear. And I got so scared that I was going to hear the whole operation, because it's like my eyes were closed and I couldn't open them. I was like, everything was dark. But I remember hearing the doctors talk over me. I remember them saying, okay, this is where the incision's going to go. And I was like screaming on the inside. Of course, I'm not screaming on the outside, but I was like, I wanted to tell them, don't do it yet. Don't do it yet. I can still hear you. And I was so scared that I was going to hear the entire operation. But luckily, it was from that point, the last thing I remember hearing was, the doctor was asking a nurse some kind of question, and then everything goes black and blank. And here's the thing, when you're in a coma, you don't know you're in a coma, or at least I didn't. And the way I experienced it was these in and out visions. Everything would come to me, and then just like a dip to black. And then it was like, the best way I could describe it is like, in the middle of the night, you wake up, and you're just like, you're asleep, and you open your eyes, and you're like, oh crap. And then you're like, oh, my alarm's not going off yet, so it's not time to get up. And you don't move, you just kind of go, I'll go back to sleep. And then you go back to sleep. It's that, but very extended long periods. And it's honestly, it sucks so bad, because the first vision I had was the doctor talking to me. But I don't know if you've ever looked at a kaleidoscope, but it's like the thing that, you know, you look through as a kid and you can turn it. You look in the sun, you see all these colors and shapes and stuff like that. That was the image I was seeing. It was like all these lights like spinning around me and like moving around. And it was like I could see him like in the center, but the lights and everything was turning around him. And to this day, I don't know if his name is actually Dr. Happy or not, but he had a mask on, and It was the old, smiley face, the yellow smiley face. And I remember him looking down at me, and it was like I was looking straight up, and he was going, Phil, this is Dr. Happy. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? And it was almost annoying because all I kept hearing was just him saying my name over and over again. And I thought I was saying yes, because I was like going, oh my God, shut up. Like, yeah, I can hear you. You're right in front of me. But I apparently wasn't. I was just frozen. And then it was almost like a first-person video game. Like, I don't know if someone moved my head or what happened, but my vision was my hands, and they were open, and he had put his finger and put it in my hand and said, Phil, if you can hear me, squeeze my hand. And I heard him, and I was like, okay. But my hand didn't move. And it was like I was looking down at my body, and it was almost like I was looking down at my body, but not through my eyes, almost like above me. Like it was like I was looking, like I could see my body looking at my hand almost. It was surreal. And he was like, squeeze my hand. And I was like, I'm trying. But it's like I could see my hand not moving, but I'm sitting there telling my head and my brain, squeeze it, squeeze it. And I couldn't do it. And then put it in the other hand, try that again. And I remember him talking to the other doctor saying, we're not getting any brain activity. I would like to do a scan of his head. And I remember thinking, wait a minute. Like, I was sitting there in my head going, like, guys, I'm here. I can hear you. Don't do anything crazy. And then it's like, from that, it goes to black. It was like I fell asleep again, or however you want to think of it. But it's like everything goes to black. And then the next thought that I remember happening is I'm inside of the CT machine. And I was very confused at first because like, this is what they did to me in Memphis. And I was like, was all this a dream? Was this a nightmare? Like, and a part of me is almost like, oh, cool, this didn't even happen. I'm just, something weird happened in the machine in Memphis. But then I realized I couldn't move. And they had my arms up like this. And I'm in the machine, and they're not talking to me. They're just talking to each other. But I heard everything they were saying. And they're like, I remember Dr. Pan saying to Dr. Happy, I know you're going to think I'm crazy. And he goes, no. And he interrupted him and goes, I would never think that. But he goes, I'm afraid he doesn't have any brain activity. And I found out why they thought that was later on. I had technically flatlined 3 different times during my operation. Again, I found this all out later, so I'm kind of jumping ahead. But this is what my parents were learning, that my 8 to 10 hour surgery ended up being 12 hours. And the first part of my surgery, I actually did die. I had the aneurysm they were fearing happened. I had, it happened. I had an aortic aneurysm. And if you want to know my odds, by all means, Google them, and they're not great. And statistically, I shouldn't be here right now. Not a lot of people live through an aneurysm. And they told me later, I found this out later, I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but that if they hadn't already had me cut open and were about to operate, there would have been no way I would have survived. Just because when the aneurysm happened, it was like perfect timing that they could fix everything, And so the first 3 hours of my operation was them just trying to keep me still alive because I had already flatlined from the aneurysm. And luckily they did. 2 other times I had lost too much blood. I bled out, and they had to give me 3 different blood transfusions. And the fact that I'm here is beyond incredible. And I'm so thankful for that. But what I didn't know was they were telling my parents that when I wake up, if I wake up, like that's how if I wake up, there was a good chance that I might not be all there. And I don't mean that in a jokey way, but it's like there was a good chance, like without them being able to see brain activity, that I was going to be handicapped. And that I wouldn't be, they didn't know. And that's how they were giving my parents all the worst case scenarios. And to me, it felt like hours. But to everyone else, it was days and ended up being weeks. And, but going back to where I was, I remember them doing a scan of my head. And then the next shot, it's called a shot because it feels like a movie, like when you dip to black and come back out. The next thing I remember is being in the ICU, and I was staring at a clock, but it was out of focus. And I was like, I remember just going, why can't I focus on this clock? Like, it was bothering me. I was just staring at it going, I can't see what time it is. And I just kept staring at it. And then, again, goes to black, comes back up. And it was very annoying because there was a bright light. Like, that's the first thing I remember seeing is this beaming bright light. And I was like, holy crap. I mean, it was blinding. And what it ended up being, which I didn't know at the time, but they had the flashlight and they were doing that. And I was actually trying to look away from the light. They say people follow light. I was doing the opposite because I was like, this sucks. And apparently that's when they first started seeing some brain activity from me by annoying me, apparently. And so that was good, that I was still in there. And I also didn't know this, but a week after I was in the coma, I was already in a coma for a week. They started, the church chaplain started bringing an iPad to me. And of course I'm out. I don't know this. This was all being told to me afterwards. But they were FaceTiming my parents 2 to 3 times a day, and they were trying to talk to me to wake me up. Because you got to remember, the hospital still had that rule that no guest or no one could be inside the hospital, especially the ICU. So to my parents, they've been in Houston, Texas over a week at this point, and they can't see me. They're not allowed in the room with me, and they're just FaceTiming me and talking to like this body that is not responding at all. And I remember hearing them. I don't ever remember seeing them until later, but all I could remember is hearing my mom saying over and over again, Philip, the surgery's over. They fixed you. Everything's okay. You can wake up now. And it was, again, it sounds like a broken record, but it was like on a loop. And I just remember hearing her saying that over and over again. And it was annoying. Like, it was just kind of like, I was like saying, okay, good. Okay, good. And then I was like, all right, I get it. But it just kept going on and on. And I was just like, man, this sucks. Like, because I want to respond. And I couldn't. Like, and then the one that to me sucked the most was, at some point, they decided I had a big long tube in my throat that apparently they were using to help me breathe, of course, which is good. I like to breathe. But they took the tube out. And I have a very strong memory of that tube coming out of my throat. And I hated that so much. I hated it. And in my brain, I'm screaming, stop it, this sucks. The weird thing about being in a coma is you hear so much and your brain is trying to process what you're hearing and sometimes seeing, because all those images and dips to black I was having, to me it felt like hours. It felt like I was just falling asleep, and then it's almost like when you fall asleep and you wake up for a second and then you look around and you're like disoriented and you're just like, I'm going back to sleep. It just felt like that over and over again. The end of the second week, they were putting me on a feeding tube, and they started talking to my parents about options, about things they needed to consider.